Hello and welcome to this training on Adobe Premiere Pro. And congrats on making the decision to learn and master this incredible program. Premiere Pro gives you the distinct ability to harness your creative energies in the form of video editing like no other. And once you learn even the basics, you'll have a skill set that can be used in almost any industry and field. Now, what do we cover in this intro to Premiere Pro class? First, we go over the Premiere Pro interface and get a feel for navigating and personalizing the program. Then we quickly import some content and get it organized in folders, or what Premiere Pro calls bins. Once our content is imported and organized, we then determine what footage should be used for importing into our timeline for editing. Once in our timeline, we learn a ton of cool stuff like cropping, trimming, slicing, rippling, rolling, slipping, sliding. Yes, these are real things. So again, congratulations on this decision. You are going to have a blast. Now, just a quick note that this course is designed to be an interactive, hands-on course. So occasionally, you'll hear me say things like, pause the video and practice on your own. So make sure you download the class files from the link below to do so. This will ensure you get the most out of the course and learn the program in a more experiential, hands-on manner. I'm looking forward to teaching you all the cool things that Premiere Pro has to offer, so stay tuned and get ready to learn. Welcome everybody. What we are looking at here is a blank new project. This project has no assets in it, has not been customized. This is essentially what you're going to see once you've created a new project from scratch. We're going to go over the process on how to create something from scratch from the beginning. But what we're going to look at here is understanding the interface and the workspace of all of what we call our panels. So what are panels? You can see here, this is our source panel. This is our program panel. This is our timeline panel. This is our project panel. And you'll see there's some other kind of hidden ones here, like our media browser panel, etc. So you can see them all over the place. Now, each of these panels is customizable. We can move them around, you can close them, and you can even add on new ones that aren't available. Now let's see where we can go to add on new panels that are not available from what we see here on the front end. So if we click on the window menu up on top, you're going to see that there is a whole bunch of panels that are not showing, or some in fact are showing. You can see based on the check marks, and some don't have check marks. So for example, if I wanted to add on, let's just see Essential Graphics, you'll see now that pops up over here. Okay, fantastic. Now if I don't want that anymore, I can very easily right click on that, close panel, and that goes away. Okay, pretty great. Now, some of these, if you don't want them, you can always click on the little X right there, and that will make that disappear. I'm not going to do that right now because I want to kind of run through an exercise on some situations where you want to close something, and then when you want to bring it back, how we can come back to a saved layout per se. All right, so very good. So we can see number one, this is the panel, the series of panels that we're currently looking at. Now, how did this particular set of panels now even start to come up? Right? Why is it showing these panels and not other panels? That is the big existential question. I want you to notice up on top here, I have this little tab here in blue highlighted, right? The rest of these are not. This is basically the editing workspace that I have chosen to be in, okay? And that's typically going to be your default workspace to be in. So let me show you what it's going to look like when I'm not in the editing workspace. I can click on Learning, and notice how everything just shifts. I'm going to click on Assembly. You can see everything just shifts, right? So very different. Let's come back to editing. You can see exactly where I started. Now, for most of you, my guess is this is where you're going to spend like 90% of your time, all right? But occasionally, once you start getting more advanced, like if you're working with some color correction, notice you go to colors and then see a bunch of options appear over here on the right-hand side, like for Lumetri Color. Go over here to Effects, and that's going to change things as well. Okay, you can see here's effects that'll pop up here. Go to Audio, okay, different things pop up. And now I'm going to go ahead and return back to editing, and you'll see, all right, very good. So you can always come back to this workspace layout anytime you want. All right, so now if I click on Window, I want you to notice there's also workspaces. And then this way you can always go through any of these other preset workspaces if you like, and also notice some of the keyboard shortcuts to be able to get to those as well if you find that you're changing them out all the time. All right, now let's see what we can do in terms of moving these things around and editing them and then kind of making them our own. So you'll notice how my source panel is a certain size. So very easily, I can now move this to make it a little bit more narrow. You can see that. I can also make it so maybe it's not so tall. So you can see that I'm just moving my mouse right to where the blue line ends. I can come over to here. Even though I don't have a blue line, I can always make this also a little more narrow, a little taller, a little more squat, whatever you want to be. And then each of these is their own little area as well. See that? So if I wanted to have my project panel not take up so much room, maybe my tools over here, maybe not. Okay, great. So now my timeline is taking up a little more room, right? So I have more space to work with. All right, so you'll want to experiment with those, right? To essentially just understand how you can take ownership of all these different panels. Now you'll also notice that a lot of these tabs have these three little dots, there, three little lines there, right? The little hamburger. So when you click on that, you're going to get a lot of extra options here. If you right click, you get very similar options, okay? So just understand that. So the right click brings up extra options. The little hamburger also brings up pretty much the same options, but understand that they're going to be different depending on which panel you are currently working with, right? So if I click on this here, notice very different options. Then when I go over here to my project, see lots of different options there. So really what we're just trying to understand is sort of the culture of the program, right? So what's going to happen when I do X, Y, and Z? If I want to move things around, if I right click on things, what's going to show up? It's going to be a very different culture than say Photoshop or Illustrator. So we just kind of want to understand like what's going to happen when I do a variety of different things. All right. Now, what I think it's going to be even more impacting is if we look at a project that's more or less already begun. So this isn't really helping you too much except for on an abstract level. Let's now take a look at an actual project and looking at the workspace. So I have a already complete project here. So I'm going to go over here to File. I'm going to go to Open Recent. And you're going to see here I have Explorer SF, which you should have access to. All right. And then now you will see something a little different, right? So some of these workspace panels have now been filled in with different assets and different content. All right. So now that we see this, we'll be able to see, oh, well, guess what? I want to move my project panel to be a little bit wider. So now I'll be able to see, look at that. A lot more content is showing up here. Okay. What about this program? Let's just say, oh, great. Okay. What that's going to do. Okay. So what in fact this is doing is if I were to watch this, for example, I'll be able to actually watch it in action and I can see it on a bigger screen or maybe even bigger than that or smaller or wider or more narrow. Okay, so we're going to go into all the details in terms of what each of these does. For right now, we're just trying to understand where we can find things and how we can kind of customize the screens a little bit. Now, let's say you didn't quite like how these panels are set up and you wanted to kind of rearrange things a little bit. So you can very easily move them around. So if you just kind of click and drag here, you notice how this tab can go this way. You can move your media browser this way if you want to. You can move your source this way. Okay, so very easily you can customize these things. Okay, so really, really nice. Now you could also move them entirely out of each individual block if you want to. So for example, if I wanted to move, let's say my libraries up here, I can very easily just drag that whole thing. You'll notice how this little kind of pretty purple appears here, telling me exactly kind of where it's going to go. So I want to keep this up on top here. So I let go, and now I have two tabs up on top here. Let me go ahead and move my metadata up on top here. You can see, very nice. So I have total control over how that is going to be presented. Okay, so totally up to me how I would like these presented, how I'd like them sized, and how you want them placed. Okay, so again, very easily move these around however you like. Now, sometimes you might want them floating. Okay, so earlier we talked about the little hamburger. So for example, if I were to click on that hamburger, you're going to see you can possibly undock a panel. So if I click on that, notice how this is now floating around here. Okay, so if I just want it kind of floating, that it's separate and independent from the rest of the panels, I can easily do that. If you ever want to move it back, just simply drag the name of the panel and then bring it back to where it started or wherever you like it to be. Okay, so pretty slick in terms of all of the different kind of customizations you have options for. Okay, so really, really neat. Okay, so let me go ahead and come back to editing. You can see there I am, and it remembers where I was. Okay, now if we now resize it and we get to a place that we really, really love, we can go back up to our window, go over here to workspaces, Okay, and I can say save as new workspace. So if I love this and I want to always come back to that, just like I come back to here, I can absolutely do that. So if I say save as new workspace, okay, I'm just going to say, okay, Explore SF workspace, okay, because it's going to be a little different than when I'm working on, let's say, a music video or something like that. Okay, I click OK, I go back up to window, you're going to see workspaces, and then bam, there it is. Okay, so whenever I kind of mess around a little bit, let me just say, for example, I close this out. Okay, I right click on it, I say close panel, oops, and it's gone. Uh-oh, didn't want to do that. So if I go back to window, go back to workspaces, and I say reset to save layout, that's going to come right back. Okay, and notice how it came right back into the same space. It also came back in the same size and location. All right, so go ahead and pause the video, practice that, get used to the interface. If you can find something that's already existing, like something that we have inside of our class files or something you have on your own, that's going to be the best way to get familiar with the workspace. And don't forget to save your workspace. You can always come back to it in case things get a little jumbled. All right, we'll see you in the next video. Now that we've talked about how we can customize our workspace and kind of make the look and feel our own, let's talk about how we can even get some content into our project. So we're currently looking at the blank project, and you're going to notice here I have this project panel right here. Showed you that earlier. And with the Explore SF, there was already content in there. So how do we actually get some media in there to work with? We talk about media, we're talking about video files, it could be audio, it could be still shots. So we want to actually bring this in so we can make some edits to it, so we can actually bring it into our timeline. So there's a number of different ways we can do that. So you'll notice how this is just blank, ready for us to go. And all I need to do is just simply double click right here, and this will take me into my computer, and I can go ahead and bring it in, whether you're on a Mac or a PC, that'll do that. Also note, if I right click on it, you're gonna have an option to import right there. You'll also notice if I go to File, and then I say import, it'll do that, same thing. And also notice the great keyboard shortcut, which is gonna be Control Command I for import. So I do that, it's gonna take me right to that same window. So you're gonna see here, I'm just gonna bring in all of these images here. I can just go ahead and marquee over that. And then I just say open, and now wait for them. There they go. And they're all brought in. Amazing. So this time, because I can't actually see everything here, it might be a good idea, instead of me double clicking, I'm gonna go ahead and just do the Control I to be able to bring it in. So if I just do Control I while that's highlighted, I can now bring in other things here. So let's now bring in more Exploratorium clips. Okay, very good. So I can go ahead and simply select that, click open, and now I'm going to bring them in just like that. All right, now earlier we talked about the amazing keyboard shortcut of the tilde to be able to see the window bigger. So when I do that, you're going to see I'm able to now navigate through this entire thing with a little bit more sort of scalability and a little more control, and more importantly, a little more knowledge, because this is going to give me the ability to see a lot more content in terms of all these columns and metadata and everything like that, whereas I wasn't able to see it here. Of course, you can also make this a little bit wider and be able to do it that way as well. So let's just take a look at this project panel now. Let's go make it a little bit bigger. And here we are. Now, some of these things you may not care about. So if you simply just right click on it, you're going to see here's an option for metadata display ... And this is going to allow you to get into a little bit deeper of like what columns you want, which columns you don't. And they give you a whole bunch of things to bring in, right? So a lot of these things I don't really care about, right? There's no frame rate here, right? I don't care about the media start and end, right? So all these things here you may not care about, right? So this is going to go on for a long time. A lot of things that you just don't need. Audio info, sure, I might want that tape name. Nope, don't really care, right? Just kind of just go scroll through all these. Some of these things you may be working with, some of you won't. And some of these things you'll notice are not checked, but you might want to bring them in. Okay, so totally up to you. I'm going to just uncheck this one, click OK, and now you'll notice a lot more manageable for me. Okay, you'll also notice I can reorder these as well. So notice my video info is there. Okay, great. Status online. Okay, great. So you know what? I'm good with this. So I get out of this, and now I can see everything as I want it, okay, and presented in such a way. Now, you will notice also that I have different icons here for the different types of media. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go over to that other video file that I started so you can see a few other ones in action. So let's go back to that. So I'm going to go here to File, Open Recent, and go over to here to Explore SF. And we'll see how we have a number of different types of media here. And in a little bit, we're going to explore how we can go a little bit deeper into this panel. But let's just see again how I can bring in something else into this project panel. So I'm going to go ahead and double click, and I'll bring in some more content. Let's come over to here. Let's go to the beach scene. And this time I'm going to bring in 2 or 3 at a time. So I'm just going to click on one, hold on the Control or Command key, and then notice how I'm selecting them non-contiguously, right? They're not next to each other, but I can very easily select them separately. And I click Open, and then bam, there you are. Fantastic, and these are really easy to work with, okay? So that's how you import. Okay, that's going to be the end of this lesson. We're going to talk about each of these panels and how we can work with the panels a little bit deeper. But for right now, it's important to understand how we can import content. Now that we have some content to work with by importing our different types of media, including our video, our still, and our audio, let's see how we can explore the project panel a little bit deeper for the purposes of organization. All right, now one thing I want you to notice that is kind of a nice little benefit of working with Premiere is that I now have 2 project panels or tabs open right now simultaneously. One is my Explore SF, and the other one is the blank project. So I can actually toggle back and forth between these 2 simultaneously, right? So it's really nice because it prevents me from having to go back and say File and then Open Recent, keep having to open it up again. You can see I can very easily go back and forth between these 2. Okay, so that's really a nice benefit, nice bonus. All right, now let's see what we can do to now import a little bit more content into this Explore SF. So again, all I'm going to do is just simply do Control-I or Command-I if you're on a Mac. I'm just going to bring in all of these image files here. Okay, so here I am inside of my stills folder. I click on Open. Okay, and then there they are. Now, the thing that's kind of bugging me about this is that, like, do I know what types of media this is, right? Notice how there's like different kind of icons here. It's kind of trying to tell me a little bit, but I want something a little bit more definitive. So earlier on, I talked about how we can look at the different metadata display columns. So if you recall, I can very easily make this bigger by hitting the tilde, and then you'll notice on the top here, I have all of my different column headings. So if I want to add on the column heading of media type, all I need to do is just simply right click, metadata display, and then come back over to here, and then guess what's sitting there waiting for me is media type. Now keep in mind that this is independent from one project to the other. So if you disabled some of these in another project, they're not going to be disabled in any other ones. But if you wanted to actually save some settings and have this come back where it's going to be a preset, you can absolutely do that, saving you the trouble and the time of having to do that again and again. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and click OK for right now. And now notice here is media type, and it's telling me I've got movie, I've got audio, I've got a sequence, which we're going to explore in a little bit, still images, etc. So that's great. So what I'm going to do now is let's get this off, and now I'm just going to go ahead and hit the tilde key, and here I am, and I'm able to see, oh, okay, very good. This, in fact, is a still image. I don't need to focus on these icons. I can very easily see them for what they are right now. Okay, so excellent. Now, let's see a few other ways of viewing things inside of our project panel. So if you'll notice over here in the lower left, I have a few little icons here. So right now, I'm in this list view. You see that? If you click on this one right here, this is going to be icon view. This gives us a nice little thumbnail preview of what each of these things are. Okay, and not only that, is if I now move my mouse over this, I can now toggle right through here to be able to see, oh, this is in fact a video. Okay, you can see I can do this one too. Great, lovely. All right, now this one, not necessarily toggleable. Why? Because it's an audio. Okay, let's come down to here. This one is video. Okay, but remember, I just brought in a whole bunch of stills. And I'll be able to, okay, great. That's just a still. And you can see it's going to show me this 429. That's basically going to mean like how many seconds and how many frames. We're going to talk about that in a little bit, but very good. Okay, but now let's say I want to see them a little bit smaller, a little bit bigger. Okay, so if I go ahead and click and drag this, notice how they're going to get bigger and then they're going to get smaller. See, just like that. So really nice. If you really want to kind of zoom in on something, you can very easily do that. Now, my screen is not big enough for me, so I can go and hit the tilde key. All right, great. Oh, that's really nice. Okay, then I'm able to then click and drag to be able to see this here. Another thing you'll notice is something called the hover scrub. Okay, so if I move my mouse over without actually clicking, notice I can actually just see it without having to do anything but just moving my mouse over it. So let's take a look at this one. Come over to here, just hovering. See that? And it's just doing the work for me. How is that actually happening? And how am I telling Premiere that I want that? So earlier we talked about the interface of how we can work with these panels a little bit more advancedly. If you go over to here, this little hamburger, and you simply right click, you're going to see here's this option for hover scrub. So if yours is not doing that, just go ahead and activate it. All right. Now you can also see here, there's a few other controls. Here's thumbnail controls for all pointing devices. Okay. So if you're working with like a Wacom tablet, if you're working on mobile, right, you're going to see it's going to give you a few more sets of options to work with. And if you can see that very well, but you can see here some options there and then some options here as well. If you wanted to control things in a little bit of a different way, you can very easily do that. I'm going to go ahead and turn that off. And then let's go ahead and check out the hover scrub. And again, I'm going to come over to here and wait for it. There we go. Depending on how cooperative your computer wants to be. There we go. There we go. Fantastic. All right. And then later on, we're going to talk about the utility around this. Like, why would we even want to do this? Obviously, we're watching it, but we're going to talk about in and out points in a little bit. Now, let me go ahead and get out of this for right now. I'm going to hit the tilde, and then I'm going to come back to here and then go to here. I'm going to make my icons a little smaller. And this time I'm going to use the minus key on my keyboard. Earlier, I showed you how you can do this. To do that, same thing to make the size, but notice I have plus and I have minus to essentially accomplish the same thing. It's not control or command, it's just the plus or minus. And you can see how this is going to be beneficial for you when we get into the timeline as well. All right, so if I go back to this, I right click, notice here is hover scrub, and then I move my mouse over it, and notice I'm able to see this, just moving my mouse over it. I'm just hovering, I'm able to see that. Okay, great. So you can see how nice this is to be able to navigate through all of your content very quickly and easily, especially with video. All right, now let's see a few other things. I'm going to come back to my list view and I'm going to jump over to this side and let's just take a look at some of these little icons here. And you're going to see a familiar icon, which is going to be this little find. So let's just say I'm looking for Cheryl, right? And I've got a lot of different files in there. I just want to find the one that has Cheryl in there. She created my audio, and there's a lot of stuff in here. It's just buried. So if I want to find something very easily, I can very easily do that. Okay, so you can see I practiced that earlier. You can see there's Cheryl, and you can see what am I looking for? I'm looking inside of the name column. What is it? It contains Cheryl, or maybe the opposite starts with, ends with, whatever. I have that there. And then you'll notice here is match. Any, all, or whatever. So I'm going to go ahead and just say any. I say find, and then bam, there's Cheryl. So this is a really great way just to find something very quickly, and now it's highlighted. Cool. Now, let's talk about some kind of additional organizational tools that we can work with. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger because I want to be able to kind of get things organized in such a way so I can be able to find them, group them, and collaborate even easier. So I want to have all of my still images together. So if you look over here on the right-hand side, I'm going to kind of zoom in a little bit. There's this option here for new bin. Okay, so in Premiere language, a bin is just a folder. All right, just a way for you to stay organized. You do not have to create bins, right? There's no obligation. Your projects will not work or not work if you don't have bins, but it's a good idea, again, to stay organized. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to go ahead and just say new bin, and I'm just going to say still images. And then bam, you can see there's a folder. I'm just going to highlight everything. So click on the first one, hold down the shift key, and then just simply drag that in. And now nice and organized. Okay, very cool. Okay, now let's do that maybe a slightly different way with our movies. So this time I'm going to kind of do the reverse. I'm going to select all of my MP4s. I do that. And this time I'm going to right click on them. I'm going to say new bin from selection. So instead of actually creating the bin first, I selected them and then I'm going to say I want to make a folder or a bin out of this selection. I do that and I'm just going to call this movies. Okay, great. And there they are. Okay, very cool. So now I'm starting to get things a little bit more organized. All right, love that. Now, in the future, we're going to talk about a few other kind of more advanced things you can see. I just don't want to ignore this new item, and a lot of things pop up here. For most of you, you probably won't be getting into these to too much of a degree, okay? But adjustment layers you might get into, a sequence we're going to talk about very soon. But a lot of these are going to be a little more advanced, but just know that that's there. All right. And now one other thing I want to talk about, and this is relatively new, is something called the free form view. So I'm just going to go back to, let's just say, my still images. All right. And I'm going to change my view from where I am now, which is my icon view, to the free form view. I click on that. Okay. And this kind of changes kind of dramatically. You're like, uh-oh, where am I right now? I'm going to open up back to still images. And then, all right, it looks kind of like the thumbnails, doesn't it? But with the free form view, it's going to allow me to kind of just say, hey, listen, I just want to find all of the things that I'm going to potentially be using for this future. So let me just go ahead and drag this out. Oh, look at that. And I can kind of stack these together. Oh, these are great, right? Let's move this over here. Okay. And you know what? This one's pretty good too. But just notice how it's in free form view. So if I kind of marquee over these, right, and I right click, then I'm going to be able to do a lot of things with these if I want to. All right, so it's just a free form way of organizing all of your content. All right, so again, don't want to ignore these, just kind of give you all the options that you might need. All right, now let's just do one last thing. I'm going to come back over here to my list view, and I want you to see how I'm currently inside of my still images, right? You can see how Premiere kind of organizes your content, right? I'm kind of like under one layer, like kind of, so I want to get out of this sort of layer kind of in the hierarchy. So I'm going to choose this guy right here to say, hey, listen, get me out of this. And now I'm back to here. All right, let me come back. Okay, very good. Now I can see that there. So always take a look at how, in case you're kind of one layer below, you can always get out of it by clicking on that icon. All right, now let's go ahead and open up now to movies. And what I want you to see here is the option to then go to the preview area, right? Just again, by right clicking, saying preview area. And this is going to give you a lot of really great information about the content that you've selected. Okay, so not only giving you a preview to be able to see that, okay, but also telling me my screen resolution, right? How long it is, right? All kinds of information around the file name, all kinds of good stuff. Now let's see what this is going to look like inside of our icon view. You can see I click on that. All right, nice. And there that is. Let's open up to still images, click on that. And now I'm not able to see that in this view. So let's go ahead and go over to here to preview. Great. And there that is. And that's giving me some more information about that particular file. Okay. All right. So really, really important to be able to see information about your content as you're clicking on it, right? As you're going into it. And again, it might be your kind of default to make it so your preview is chosen there. Okay. And then notice how you can also change my preview from regular list to thumbnail. I can very easily do that. And then finally, the last thing you might want to do is to change the view altogether from your just regular kind of just basic sort of standard thumbnails without any image preview to thumbnails just like that. And you can very easily do that. I'm going to go to my plus sign. Okay, that's kind of nice. I'm getting a nice little preview at the same time. And let me come back out of this. Okay, go back to here. Great. And there's everybody. Lovely. Let's open that up one more time. Great. Very cool. Just toggle back and forth between all of these, however you like to see it. Okay, so you can see we got lots of options. It goes across the board, whether it's a video or a still shot. All right, so getting to really master and understand how to work with the project file from making, the project panel, from making it bigger to be able to stay organized with your bins, to be able to see the different views as a list or as a series of thumbnails, making them larger. Okay, also customizing all of your columns here to so many different levels in terms of scrubbing through all of your content is so important. So before you even move forward with actually editing your videos, make sure you really get comfortable with the project panels. All right. So import some content, get yourself organized, get some content in there, and then make sure you understand how to navigate, how to work through the panel itself to be able to get your content quickly and easily and stay organized. All right, so practice that and we'll see you in the next lesson. Okay, and welcome back. This lesson, we are going to get into the source panel. So the source panel you'll see over here. It's in the upper left as far as my editing workspace is concerned, but you will see that it says source, and then you're going to see next to it is going to be the file name that in fact is the source. Now, how did this even show up here? It's all connected to what I have inside of my project panel. So if I double click down here, you're going to see the source that I'm working with is what I've just double clicked on, and it's going to show me the content of that. So if I go over to here to my audio, you can see now my source is this audio, the Stepping Out from Cheryl. Go to my still images, double click on that, and that's going to be my source here. Now, what is the purpose of the source? The source is going to allow us to view all of our content so we can decide different in and out points, so we can maybe do a little bit of minor editing. So then we can get it all ready and tweaked so we can bring it ultimately into our timeline here. Our timeline is ultimately going to be our editable project file that is going to be the final output. But all that stuff needs to get cooked up first, potentially inside of the source panel first. So let's take a look at what our options are here. So I'm going to go ahead and just double click on this sushi stuff here. And we're going to take a look at what options we have inside of this. All right, so number one, I could just simply start playing this, right? So notice here I have a nice little timeline here. I can play it this way. I can also play it using my little play button right there. And you'll see there it is. But also notice I can also hit the space bar. So if you move your mouse over, it'll tell you little keyboard shortcut, and I can play it and I can pause it, play it, and I can pause it. All right, now you'll also see a few other things here, right, in terms of my timestamp. So if you move your mouse over it, you'll notice how you can go frame by frame very easily to go a little bit at a time. If you know you want to go 3 seconds and how many frames is that? Okay, great. So this is about 30 frames per second. So you can see how it's going to go from 2829 and then it goes right to 0. Okay, great. So, and I can also change it from here if I want to. I can just say, listen, let's make that 3, and then it takes it right back to it. So when you want that kind of precision, you can go right to your timestamp playhead position right here. Okay. And like I said, you can also scrub the playhead. Totally up to you. Also notice that you can do it with your keyboard. This is going to go frame by frame. And what am I doing with my keyboard right now? I'm just using the right arrow and the left arrow. Very simply to be able to get frame by frame precision if you are looking for a particular part right there. Okay, so bam, there I am. Okay, and if I want to go back to the beginning, I can just hit the up arrow. If you want to go back to, well, if you have an in and out point, you can very easily go up and down to each of those individual parts. So the up arrow goes back to the beginning, down arrow is going to take you to one part of your in and out point, and this goes to the end. Now, what is this in and out point? That is this section right here that we're going to explore in just a little bit. Okay, so this is our in and out point. Essentially, it's kind of a saved fragment of a particular part of a video that we may want to use. What I'm going to do for right now is just clear out this in and out point. So I'm going to go ahead and just go to that, and then that goes away. And we're going to talk about what these in and out points are in just a little bit. But again, notice I can say up and down, takes me from the beginning, takes me to the end. All right, now let's just talk about some other elements that we see here. So you'll notice there's a drop down here. How do you want to fit to the zoom level? So I'm going to go ahead and go to 100, and you can see, okay, that's really zoomed. I'm going to go back to 25%. If like that, but usually best fit is really a good place to view things. Recall also, if you want to, you can make that bigger and smaller. You can also undock it. And this is especially useful if you have two screens. You want to undock it and you want to just bring this over to another screen and where you can see it over here. You can absolutely do that. Or you can just simply bring this right back and there you are. Okay, so this is going to be really helpful for how you're going to view your content. So let's now take a look at some of our other options here. So we're going to jump over to this side next. So you'll notice how this just says half, right? What exactly is this referring to? If you move your mouse over it, it says select the playback resolution. So if your computer is really being taxed in terms of the memory and processing, you might want to bring this down to a quarter, or if it lets you go down even lower than that. So therefore, your computer doesn't have to process so much to see the actual resolution of what the original video is. So you'd want to do that, again, if it's taxing your memory, but just understand that when you do finally render it, you're not going to get this quarter or half. You are, in fact, going to get the full. Now, if you did want to see what it's going to look like to really get the true quality, then you could change this to full, but just do understand that it is going to use up a lot more processing power on your computer. So Premiere does give you the option one way or another if you wanted to show it that way or not, okay, in terms of the resolution. All right, let's take a look at this little wrench icon here in terms of different settings. Many of these you will not be exploring at this stage of the game, but let's just take a look at some things you may want to see. Like, for example, you might want to see the audio wave, right, as far as part of this, because maybe you're only concerned about the audio part of this video, and that's all you care about if you're doing what we call B-roll, and that's really all you want. The video is terrible. You're going to put some other audio on top of it, and that's really all you care about. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and come back to this. I'm going to go back to my composite video, and there we are. Okay, so it's just different ways of viewing things if you want to. All right, so, and just take a look. There might be some other options here. Again, here's your high quality playback. All right, we're going to talk about markers in a little bit. Okay, so just understand what some of these things are going to do just from additional settings. Okay, fantastic. Now, let's just mouse over some of these icons to see more or less what they do. If you move your mouse over this, you're going to see here it says drag video only. This is going to say drag audio only. So if I were to drag this right now into my timeline, it's only going to take the video. So then it leaves all that audio behind. This is going to do the opposite. It's only going to drag in the audio. Okay, so let me just show you. Okay, so if I just drag this into my timeline, you're going to see this now has just video. And how do I know that here? Because you can see this says V right there, and there's no A as part of this. So I'm going to go ahead and just get rid of this. Simply select it, hit delete. And then if I choose this one here, I drag this in, and now notice all those little waveforms there. That's only bringing in the audio. Okay, so many times that is going to be beneficial because, again, sometimes you don't want the video because it didn't come out so good and you just want the audio and you're going to overlay some other video on top of that. You have that option to do that. Now let's take a look at some of these options here, right? You have lots and lots of options for how and what we want to choose to bring content in ultimately into our timeline. So you'll see here, there's options for adding markers. We're going to talk all about markers later on. Okay, but markers essentially, if I'm here and I want to mark this for later on, say, hey, listen, this is going to be important, or hey, we need to get some better footage of this or something like that, I can very easily simply click. And then now I have a marker here. Let's come over to here and possibly do it a different way. Because you'll notice when I move my mouse over it, there's a little M in parentheses telling me that's going to be the keyboard shortcut. And that's the one that I recommend. And you can see very easily, I can start adding markers on there. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of those. Right click, I'm going to say clear all markers, and then that's gone. Okay, now moving along here, you have these two little braces here. You can see here is the mark in, and then here is the mark out. Earlier, when I brought up my video, you saw I had this like kind of gray bar going across here. That was essentially saying what's my in point, what's my out point, so I can very easily decide little bits and little pieces and little chunks of what I want to actually store. So let me just go ahead and watch this. And I say, okay, that's really great. Okay, right when they go over the line, I want to say that's going to be the beginning of what I want. So right there. So I would mark that right now with a little endpoint. So those of you probably notice already, so in parentheses, you have a little I to be able to mark your endpoint. So that's what I'm going to do. There's my endpoint. So I'm going to keep playing it. And I'm going to hit the space bar as soon as it starts to go down. Maybe I'm going to go back a little bit. See that? Just using my right and left arrows. I'm going to hit the, guess what? The O key on my keyboard. And now I have an in and out point. Now, why is that important? I have now specified a very particular part of my video that I want to then go into the timeline. See that? Nothing else will actually go. Just that little space right there that I have set that I want to be part of my video, I can easily do that. Now, earlier I showed you, yes, I can just drag the video. Yes, I can just drag the audio. But if I want everything, just drag the video from up on top here, and that's going to bring everything in. And you'll notice now this time I have both video on top and I have audio on the bottom, and these two different layers here. Now, sometimes you might want to move these around, right? You can notice how this is one grouping here. Now, I want you to notice how this is one big group of going from in to out. If I move my mouse over this and I decide, you know what, I'm going to actually go maybe a couple of frames back from my in and out, I can easily do that. See that? I can move this around as a group. You'll also notice that these little bookends are also editable. So, oh, you know what, let's actually get a little bit more from here. You know what, I kind of want to have a little bit of a lead up. That's great. And that's showing me kind of how it's going to end. Okay, that's great. So I can come back to here, delete this, and then I can then drag this in back into the timeline here. But let's take a look at some other ways that we can bring it into the timeline if you're not comfortable with that, so we can look at some other different ways. You'll notice here's this insert option. And notice that's just a little comma. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on that. And it pretty much does the same thing as I did before, just by dragging it. And now let's maybe get another video clip here. So I'm going to double click on that. And let me clear out these in and outs. I'm just going to go ahead and right click, clear that out. And let's just say I want to insert another video clip from here. So let me just start from here. I'm just going to say in, come over to here. I'll just say O for out. And then I'm going to insert it, and then notice what it's going to do. So I'm going to go over to here, say insert, and it just comes right there, right where the playhead started. Let me do that one more time so you can see where that playhead is. That is where it's going to insert, right? You can see that. Bam. There you have it. That's good. And then I just say insert. Okay, that's great. So let me undo that. Let's come to the beginning, and let's see the difference here. So I'm going to go ahead and just say insert, and that pushes it over. Now, I'm showing you this because I want to make the distinction between insert and overwrite. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and undo. And this time, I'm going to click on overwrite, and you'll notice what it does. It overwrites everything. Okay, I don't want that. So let me show you maybe a slightly different, shorter version of this, right? So this is only going to be about 1 second. And this time I'm going to do overwrite. And then notice it overwrites only the first second of that footage. So maybe that's your goal, right? So let me come over to here and I'll do another maybe 1 second of this part here. Okay. And then I'm just going to do overwrite or just hit the period key, and that overwrites here. Okay. So if you take a look at this here, we actually have 3 different separate clips. And if we watch it here, I'm just going to hit the space bar, 1 second, that comes up, another thing. Okay, great. And then there was another one in there as well. I can go ahead and get rid of that. All right, so you can see how all of this can really come together from the source panel by picking and choosing which parts that you want to have using our in and out, and also deciding whether you're going to insert it or overwrite, and depending on where the playhead is, that's where it's going to land. Now I'm going to come back to my Sushi Chef, and I'm going to show you one other tool that we can use here in the source panel, which is the export frame option. So there might be a still frame on this that I'd like to get. So that's a great shot of our chef in action. And I want this as just a shot, right? Just one still image, and I want that exported out. And that's where this option is going to come in here. You can see here is this little camera icon. You move your mouse over, it's going to say export frame or Control or Command Shift E. Click on that. It's going to say, okay, well, what do you want to call this? All right, so I can spell sushi chef better than I can say it. So I'm going to go ahead and just type that out. And it's going to ask me, well, what file format do you want? I'll just make it a JPEG. That's great. Where do you want to put it? I want to put it in with my stills. That's great. Fantastic. Do I want to import this into the project? Maybe, maybe not. I'm not sure at this point. So I'm just going to say okay. I click OK. And now I have that available. So let's go ahead and go into that folder into my computer to be able to see it. So here I am inside of stills, and here is our sushi chef. Wonderful, great, does a really nice job. And now I have that, and I can use that anytime I want, right? I can use that, bring it into my website, I can send it as a newsletter, I can do all kinds of different things to it, bring it into Photoshop, and then master it however I like. All right. So the last thing we're going to talk about here within our source panel is this little guy right here, this little plus sign. This is our button editor. Some of these buttons you may not want. There might be certain tools here that you do want to add to it, and that is going to allow you to do it using the button editor. You'll notice that you'll see other button editors in other places on the screen as well. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and click on that, and you're going to see all kinds of things are going to pop up here. Some of these things are going to look familiar, like your in out. And some things might be a little bit new. If you're working with VR, if you want to have some separators, you can very, very easily do that. And if you don't want certain things here, like say, for example, like my step back, right? I use my keyboard shortcut for that. So I don't really need that. So I can get rid of that. Okay, let's go ahead and go to, that's just the space. I want to bring the space back over to here. Let's add on another space. Maybe bring that over here. Okay, so I can absolutely control how I have all my buttons laid out very easily. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and say okay, and now I have a different button set. Of course, you can change the order, do whatever you like. All right, so again, hopefully you understand what the purpose of the source panel is. All right, it's going to allow us to go from our project into our source and then pick and choose which parts of the video that we want to bring actually into our timeline. So think about that process. It starts from here. We're able to view it. We're able to choose in and out points and then bring it into our timeline however we like. All right. In our next upcoming videos, we're going to take a look a little bit deeper into the timeline itself and how that works with our program panel and how we can also make all kinds of more basic edits, but also some advanced edits as well. All right. So please practice this, start building your own projects, start picking and choosing different video components you want to bring in there, maybe even do some exporting if you like, change the button order, change all kinds of different things in terms of, the audio, the video, everything we've done. Put this to use, and we'll see you in the next video. In this lesson, we're going to talk about how we can work with markers inside of our source panel. Earlier, I showed you how you can right-click and you can very easily say, hey, let's add a marker into this. I also showed you how you can use the letter M to do markers. So we're going to go a little bit deeper how we can actually add in markers, and we're going to see the value of working with markers and how we can also add on comments and text and also color code our markers. So everything that we're going to learn here about markers is also going to be able to be applied to other panels like our program panel as well. Okay, so we may do a quick lesson on that, but just understand that pretty much the same process that we're going to learn here for our source panel for markers is going to be able to be applied for our program panel as well. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and hit play on here. Okay, and there we go. And I'm just going to hit, as soon as I see something interesting, I'm going to hit M. Okay, there's some people there. I want people out. Good, I'm going to mark that in there. Just wait. Okay, I'm zooming in. All right, more things are happening. Okay, good. Just hitting M again. Oh, I like that. Someone's touching it. Cool. All right. Nice. Fantastic. So I got a lot of markers here. Why do I have the markers here? So I can very easily go right back to them. Tells me stay organized with my content. Very cool. But I also want to label these. Okay, so that's where we're going to actually take kind of next level here. So if I double click on this marker, I want you to notice what's going to pop up. I can now name this marker. I can just say, okay, so this is going to be opening, just call this a long shot. Okay, so this is going, I'll just say this will be intro to the science components. Okay, great. And then notice down below, I have the marker colors. Okay, so just for right now, I'm just going to make that red and simply click OK. And now you'll notice that my marker has now changed color. I move my mouse over it, and it tells me exactly what I just wrote down. Opening long shot, this will be the intro to the science component. Very good. Come back over to here. Great. And then you know what? I don't really want this. I'm going to right click on that. I'm just going to say clear selected marker. And there you have it. Great. So let's come back over to here and then, all right, that's nice. And I don't really think that's very interesting either. So I right click on it, clear selected marker. Great. Now some of these other ones, let's just go to this one here. I'm going to right click on this one and then notice, got to be right on top of it, by the way. So if you right click on it, I'm going to say edit marker this time. I do that, and that pretty much takes me to the same exact thing as I saw before when I double clicked on it. Okay, so I'm going to say touch the tube segments. It's great. And then I'll just make that purple. Click OK. And there you have it. Okay, so you can continue on and on and on from there. We can see the process is all about organization. Now, once you start having quite a few of these markers, you might want to be able to just go through them very quickly and easily. And then notice here, you can right click and you can see go to next marker, and see it just goes right to the next marker. Go to the next marker, just snaps right to those. Okay, so that's really nice to be able to do that. Now, if I don't want these anymore, again, just simply right click. I'm going to say clear selected marker, right click, got to get right on it. Okay, and that's where if you were to hit the tilde key, you might be able to get a little bigger of a version of this to be able to get rid of that. Okay, so come back to here, come back to there, or like I said, just right click on it and then just go to previous or to next, and I'll hit my tilde key and I'll come right back. Okay, now later on, we're going to go into our program panel. We're going to see also how we can work with our markers, and we're also going to do the same thing inside of our timeline. All right, so practice that up. Hopefully you see the utility in that, and we'll see you in the next lesson. In the last few lessons, we covered the source panel, and we broke things down in terms of getting content from the source panel using in and outs and markers and bringing them into our timeline. So in this series of lessons, we're going to go a little bit deeper into the timeline. So your timeline is going to exist right over here in the lower right for me. And you're going to notice that I have a whole bunch of different layers over here, and I have my audio and I have my video, and I also have a name right up here. This name right here, this is known as my sequence name. Okay, so when you hear sequence and you hear timeline, they're more or less synonymous. Okay, so I want you to notice also over here within my bin that I have this little icon right over here, and I've created another bin called sequences that I've organized them. So let's just go ahead and take a look at the difference between the icons that we see here for our videos versus our sequences. This is a sequence that's already been created, and it was created essentially by default by Premiere when I brought something into a blank timeline. So let me go ahead and demonstrate a few ways to create sequences. So I'm going to close this out. It's right in here. And right now I have nothing in my timeline, and even notice it says no sequence, right? So sequence, timeline, more or less synonymous. So I'm going to take my in and outs here. I'm just going to go ahead and just do in, right? And not even do out. I'm just going to drag this inside here. And you'll notice now automatically it's created something for me. And it's named the sequence automatically based off of the name of the clip that it came from. Okay, so notice here is the source 2018, etc. Here it is 2018. Okay, so just understand how that works. Now, I could be creating a sequence in another way just by taking my video from my bins on the left-hand side over here and then just bringing them in and then creating a sequence that way. So let me just go ahead and close this out. And now let's just grab something from my videos folder. I'm just going to go ahead and just collapse all this so we can see this here. And you can see I have all my information on this. I'm just going to drag this in. And you can see now I have all this content in here. You'll notice there's even markers in here that are pre-existing from when they were inside of the source panel. Pretty cool. I can see all that information there, and that's really helpful. Now, if I wanted to now rename this and I wanted to get a little more organized with it, I would come back over to here. Now, something really important to notice is that as soon as I drag this from here into here, a new icon now appears. Okay, so I actually have a new sequence that I didn't have before that was magically just sort of birthed just by me clicking it over here. So not only in the timeline was that sequence created, but also I now have a new object inside of my bins. So I want to rename this, right? Let me just watch it. Okay, so I'm just going to call this the, Tesla coil or something like that, right? So I can see that's there. Okay, that's great. So I'm going to rename that. Okay, so just simply click on it and just say Tesla coil. I hit enter, and now notice not only does it change here, but it also changes up here. And then what I'd like to do is move this to be organized into my sequences. And now there it is right there for me to use. Okay, so that's really the first thing to understand about sequences. Now, I'm going to leave you with this one little bit before we start getting a little bit deeper into timelines, is that we might want to know what our sequence settings are, okay? And that's going to be important when you're working with, certain types of needs in terms of your frame rate and resolution and things like that. So if you go over to here to this sequence menu up on top, you click on that, you're going to see here is your sequence settings. Click on that, and you can see there's going to be a lot of information about my sequences, right? So I could then change these if I wanted to. If I wanted to override it, do all kinds of different things here in terms of my audio, my frame rate, my resolution, everything like that. You can then change these if you want to. And if things are not matching up because maybe you have, two different types of videos coming in together as one, right? You might get an error message on that, and you'll need to decide ultimately which settings to choose, okay? And you'll know when the time comes what the right setting is, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and click OK. And if I wanted to add in something else from here, right, I'll just drag this in. See, I can then drag this in, and now that's now adding on to my sequence, all right? And then ultimately, I would then edit this and then export it out. And this is essentially my project, right? This is essentially what I'm gonna be working on, okay, that I've kind of cooked everything up potentially up in my source panel up here, and it ends up over here in my timeline. Now, eventually we're going to start working with this program panel, so we'll be able to see how we can, see what's down here and then make any edits as necessary, and then it'll ultimately end up in our timeline, right? Or it's going to be really doing what's in our timeline in real time. Now, the good news is a lot of the stuff that we learned about our source panel, we can transfer that bit of knowledge over into our program panel. You're going to see the icons look very similar, little timeline looks the same, and we have a lot of these other things in terms of the playback resolution, right? The timestamp, right? The ability to actually add on some more buttons, all this good stuff here. So everything that we just covered in those last few chapters, you're going to see we can transfer this over into our program panel just as well. Okay, so go ahead and pause the video, practice creating your first sequence based off of some videos you have, maybe add some more in there, check out the sequence settings, just get comfortable with it. But we are going to get a little bit deeper in terms of editing in just a little bit. Okay, see you in the next video. Okay, now that we have a good understanding about the timeline and sequences, let's start actually building something out in kind of a realistic way of how we might have things organized primarily, and then how we'd bring it into the timeline and then do some editing. All right, so you'll notice over here in my little bin section over here, I again have my little project folder here. And then within, I have all my individual bins. And I've organized things pretty nicely here where I have all my videos here. And again, my still images, my sequences, all that good stuff here. And then within my video bin, I've created these separate sub bins. Okay, so if you can recall, you can make bins just by using this little icon right there. And it's going to create a bin. You can rename it, and then you can even stack it within other bins like I have here, where I have kind of, folders and subfolders essentially. All right, so I have this exploratorium restaurant scene, and I also have another one called science. This all has to do with my exploratorium project. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just unfurl this a little bit so I can see I have everything nice and labeled. Okay, so if you want to label any of these, you simply just click once, and then you click again, and you just start renaming it. Kind of like a slow motion click, right? Good time to kind of take a little deep breath. You just sort of click once, take a deep breath, and click again, and just start typing. Okay, now I'm going to be able to see all the information about my videos and such right here. You can see, again, I can name it. You can see here's the video duration, here's my media type, here's my frame rate. And once again, if you don't see the information you want, you can right click, go over here to metadata display, and then you can unfurl this little guy over here, and then you can add whatever you want inside of here, right? You can see this. So just go ahead and check the boxes if you want to see certain elements on there if you like. So I'm going to go ahead and cancel out of that. Okay, and I'm going to do the tilde key to then make that nice and big so I can be able to see everything within here. Okay, so just a little review for you in case you forgot, but in case you wanted to see certain elements like the video info, right? It's way over here, right? You can see this is really important information, especially if my sequences are conflicting with each other. I might want to have this way over here as like one of the first things that we see, right? Like, okay, that's actually really important. Okay, so I'm gonna hit the tilde key once again, come back here, and then I'll be able to see, good, there's my video info, and I can see, good, they all match with each other. Just in case they don't, again, you check out your sequence settings to make all that happen. Okay, so now let's go ahead, and I'm gonna go ahead and expand this out a little bit, and I'm just gonna start kind of telling the story about, my restaurant and everything, right? So I've labeled these accordingly, according to my kind of storyboard, but then again, that might change. So let's just see what we can do just to basically start a timeline sequence of what I might want to have in here. All right, some of you may have already started inside of the source, but I want to give you another set of options that you can also do it looking at the timeline. So what I'm going to do now is just drag this into my timeline, and then bam, that now gets created. Okay, so I now have a sequence. And again, notice that I now have a new icon that's appeared, and it's related to this sushi chef close-up. Okay, I'm going to rename that, and I'm going to move this into my sequence folder. Okay, so I'm just going to call this Exploratorium Doc. Okay, and now I'm just going to go ahead and just drag this. It's going to go up into my sequences. Okay, it doesn't really change anything in terms of what's going to happen on this side except for the name, but now I'm good to go. All right, now let's just go ahead and just watch it. I'm going to hit the space bar. You'll be able to see it up on top. That's great. Awesome. Good. All right. Wonderful. Now, if I change my mind, I don't want that anymore, I can just simply go ahead and select it and then hit the delete key, and it's gone, right? The delete key on my keyboard, and it's gone. Okay, so as easy as that. Now what I'm going to do next is I'm going to bring in something else. So let's go ahead and bring in, let's say, the restaurant sign entry. That's going to be maybe a good way to kind of tell my story. I'm going to bring this in. Okay, that's great. And then notice, because the sequence has already started, I can actually just bring it in as it is currently existing, right? So I don't need to really necessarily worry about having to do a whole new thing all over again, because it already exists as essentially a file if you think about it like that. Okay, so I'm going to come back to the beginning. I'm just going to hit the up arrow, and that takes me all the way back to the beginning. And I'm going to hit the space bar. Great, that's a nice introduction to it. And then maybe I'm going to tell a little story about, okay, the restaurant long shot. So I'll go ahead and bring that in this way, and notice how I can just kind of just let that snap right into place. Okay, and then let's just go ahead and back this up a little bit. Okay, good. So pretty simple, just bringing this stuff in this very nice little kind of linear manner. All right, so let's just kind of build this off a little bit. So then I'm just going to go ahead and just take my sushi chef at another angle, just bring that in. All right, great. Good. And then we're going to see him again. We're going to see him close up. And now we start to see, as I do that, my timeline's getting a little bit crowded. Okay, like, oh, wait, what's going on over there, right? What's missing on the right-hand side? So let's see how we can zoom in and zoom out of our timeline a little bit. So if I hit the minus sign, look at that. This is the minus sign on my keyboard, plus sign on my keyboard. Zoom in, zoom out. There's no control, there's no command, there's no shift. It's just simply minus and plus. That's very valuable because your timeline is going to start getting pretty crowded pretty quickly. All right. So nice thing to know about there. Now, sometimes you also may want to be able to see some of the content in here. You might want these to be a little bit taller and shorter. Okay. Now you can use your mouse to do some of these things. If you notice over here on the right-hand side, right? If I drag down, notice that's going to make it a little bit taller. Okay. And then if I hit the plus sign, so I'm able to see kind of a little thumbnail version of that. Okay. So again, all I did was do this. Okay. Now, if I do Control plus plus, see that? That allows it to grow taller, just the same thing as the way I did the first time. If I do Alt plus plus, that makes the audio grow. Okay, so if I start to kind of really build this out more, I'm able to see, okay, good. There's a nice little kind of preview of things, but also kind of bigger targets for me to isolate as I start doing my edits. Okay, so it's something you're going to want to really practice, get some of that fluidity down. All right, now let's just review some of these shortcuts. Okay, so if I just hit the up and down arrow, that goes from going from the beginning of a clip to the end of a clip, all the way to the end, just like that. See that? Really nice. Okay, if I just hit the minus key on my keyboard, that just zooms in and zooms out, right? Plus zooms in, minus zooms out, just like that. And if I do the Control plus, that will now make the clips taller on the timeline for my video. And if I do Alt plus minus, that will do just the audio. So this will be something you're going to want to just play around with. And again, if you prefer to use the mouse, you can go ahead and just do this way, and you can see that does the same thing. Okay, now let's go ahead and explore some of the other elements that are on the timeline. Now, you'll notice a few things that might be familiar to you, like a little eyeball here, right, to make this visible or invisible, right? So if you do that, then not only you're not going to see it here in the program panel, but when you export it, you will actually not see it. So this is basically saying, hey, I might want to do, one version without this video. Maybe you've got some B-roll on there, or maybe you're going to take away some audio. You just take that away, okay? Notice down over here, you also have some familiar letters, I hope, right? Notice when you move your mouse over it, you can mute this track, right? So therefore, when I play it, I won't be able to hear anything. Or you can say, this is just going to only play this particular track. So this is going to be the solo track. Okay, so really nice. Only that's going to play. So in case you have some voiceover there over your music, you just want to hear how the music is going to be, or just the voiceover, you're going to only want to hear the voiceover. And this implies you have other tracks, right? Because right now, notice that we only have one video track and we have one audio track. So if you have other ones, if I were to say, hey, only play this one, it's going to mute out the other audio tracks there, right? So just keeping that in mind. Okay, you'll also notice that I have this option to lock, right? So therefore I can't mess with this. If I'm accidentally clicking on it, whatever it is, just getting in the way, right? I can just lock that, right? So therefore notice I can't do anything with it. As much as I try, I can go and unlock it, and then bam, there that is. Now we also have a few other things here, like our V1, our A1. We're going to talk about a little bit more about that in a little bit with our track selectors. And what these two things do is the first one on the right-hand side, it basically tells me which video track am I on, which is V1, and this is going to be audio 1. Now what these two are going to be talking about is where they are going to be locking and tracking from when we go to our source panel and then bring them in. So when we bring something in, we may not want it to automatically track to one of these audio tracks or this video track. We might want it to be to V2 so we can tell it to do that, right? We're not going to do that right now, so just stay tuned for that video. Then you've got a few other options here that we're going to explore in just an upcoming video in a little bit. So just kind of keep an eye for what we see up on top here. And we also have these toolbars here, which we're going to explore all kinds of different things here. Okay, so in the meantime, go ahead and practice and get comfortable with all these different elements on the timeline for making yourself more fluid as far as zooming in, moving around, right? Making things bigger, smaller, okay? And then also working with these elements as far as muting, locking, toggling your visibility, etc. Okay, so pause the video, have fun, and we'll see you in the next lesson. In the last lesson, I talked about our track selectors, right? Meaning that where do you want our source, when we have our source video, what tracks do you want it to end up on inside of our timeline? So notice how we have V1 to V1, A1 to A1. That's pretty simple. But sometimes you want some of your video or your audio, whatever, to go on a completely different track. So what's nice about working with digital video, as you know, is that you can layer your tracks on top of each other. So if I look at this video that I have in my timeline, I'm starting off here with my sea glass. But let's say I want to have a part of my sushi chef in action. Maybe I want to have him on top, right, above, right, where it comes into sea glass, and then bam, it goes very quickly to the sushi chef, and then it goes back to the sign, and this and this and that. So I want it to be on another layer. Okay, so I can easily move this up and down. I can go here to there, whatever, and I can notice I can do that. Okay, I can move this down here if I wanted to, right? That's pretty simple. I'm just going to do Control Z or Command Z on the Mac if you want to do that, but pretty straightforward. But now what I want to do is actually use these tools to be able to do this and do it pretty kind of fluidly. All right, so you'll notice here I have a nice little in-out right here. So I can go ahead and just select this panel and I can watch it. Okay, let's come over to here. Okay, there he is. Okay, and then maybe not so long. So remember, I can just go ahead and bring this in. Okay, he's just going real fast. I love that. So let's just go ahead and grab this. You just wait for the hand there. Okay, and then I think maybe about second, 2 seconds will be good for that. Perfect, okay? And then I want this little bit to end up on the top layer here in V2 and also the audio down below here. Or maybe you don't want audio at all. It's totally up to you. Remember, you can also just say, hey, listen, only do the video, only do the audio. But let's see what we can do now to make the tracks go where we want them to go. So I'm just going to very simply choose this right here. You can see, bam, and then I'm going to come over to here. And now notice what I'm doing is I'm basically sort of like tracking them so they can kind of link to these ones that I now have selected. So this is coming from the source, but it's going to end up over here, right, inside of this V2. So let's just take a look at this now. How is this going to work? You'll notice here I have my insert and I have my overwrite. Let's see the difference between those two. I'm going to simply click on that and you can see, oh, what does that do? Insert. Oh, okay, that might work. Okay, because it kind of splits things apart a little bit and it makes everything go over here, and that's not bad. Okay, all right, there he goes. And then we're back to this. Okay, cool. So we're just kind of setting up, you know, kind of the layout for kind of this sort of, you know, speed and drama and everything. Let me go ahead and just undo all that. I don't necessarily want that necessarily. I'm going to explore some more. And this time I'm going to go to overwrite. So when I choose that, and again, notice I'm going from V1, A1 right here to then go to these layers right there. I do that, and then notice more or less the same thing is accomplished where they go to the corresponding respective layers, to the right tracks, but it doesn't actually split anything apart, right? It doesn't kind of like divorce those, the kind of the integrity of how these video clips were to begin with. Okay, so it doesn't expand the time. It's another way to look at it. So let's take a look at it now. Great, and that was nice, fluid jump from one scene to the other. Okay, so kind of an important thing. I could do that manually, certainly, right? I can kind of bring another one over here. Let's just go ahead and find my little hand. Let's just grab this, okay? And let's see what that looks like. Okay, great. And then maybe later on, you're trying to do a completely different one from here. Like let's maybe just grab this. And then this time I could just say, hey, listen, I'm only going to drag the video. And then I could just drag it right here if I wanted to, just the same, because this track now exists. It's active, it's live. And you can see I can go to here, and then there's gonna be another one right there. Okay, a little bit odd in this case, but just know how easy it is to be able to do that. Okay, so just a quick little lesson on our track selectors. See how that works, because you might see that. You might see these other layers and these other tracks. You can say, well, how does that work? And then why is one clickable versus the other? You're basically just saying, hey, track to this track. That's another way to look at it. Okay, so practice that, and we'll see you in the next lesson. Now, one of the most important and most widely used tools you're going to see with the timeline is the razor tool. Just think about a razor tool like you would see if you're going to be doing some old-fashioned editing, right? We're just kind of cutting things up, cutting up our film strip to make things piece together and remove things that we don't need. So we're going to kind of jump around a little bit out of order on these guys here. You can see I have all of our tools here, and there's one that looks like an old-fashioned steel blade, and that is going to be your razor. So if you move your mouse over, it's going to tell you, in fact, what it is. Okay, and you can see, bam, that is the razor tool. You'll also notice that you can just hit the C key. Now, the other important one in this same little grouping here is this one right here, which is the selection tool. So I'm going to hit the V key to go back to that, hit the C key to go back to that. So really important ones to know about. So think about C like cut, and think about V like the shape of this icon. That's a good one to remember about. Okay, so now let's just see how this is going to work for us. I'm going to zoom in, just hitting the plus sign, and I'm just going to drag this over a little bit. Okay, and I'm just going to just watch this. So we see I have a lot of kind of lag time before really anything kind of happens, but I want to kind of just wait for his head to turn a little bit. Okay, so, all right, so I don't really need all this stuff here, right? All that kind of like lead up. Yeah, those lobsters are pretty cool, but maybe I'll just put that into another shot. So like right about here is where I want to cut that. So if I hit this right here, or if I just tap on the C key, I'm just going to go right over to there. Notice how it locks right in. Okay, it's kind of nice. I click on that, and then notice I now have two separate clips. Okay, and right now we're just noticing we're not clicking on anything. Why do I not want to click? Because my razor tool is still activated. So that's why we just learned about the V key, so I can go right back to my selection. So that I can click on this and then just select it and then delete it. Okay, so really important, because guess what? I don't want this, but I do want this, so I can very easily get rid of it. Now watch what happens when I hit delete on my keyboard. Big old gap. Right? We don't necessarily want that gap, of course, right? Unless we're planning to put something else in there. So I'm going to go ahead and undo that. So instead of just hitting delete, I'm going to hold down the shift key and hit delete, and then notice what that does, right? That basically does what we call this like ripple delete. So basically it says, hey, listen, let's go ahead and just get rid of all those extra spaces there that was there before, and just close it all up and then bridge those two together. All right, so that's a really, really important one. We're going to talk about kind of the ripple tool and the roll tool in just a little bit, but I want you to see how we can do that kind of maybe a little more manually. Okay, now there's another really important keyboard shortcut I want to show you, which you can kind of do things on the fly rather than actually having to go to your razor tool if you want to accomplish the same goal here, right? So say this is just happening a little bit too long here. I just want to clip some of this stuff out. Couple of things we can do. Right? In this same conversation about the razor tool, if you just do the Command or Control K, notice what that does. Okay, Command or Control K essentially just clips it right where the playhead is. Okay, so I don't actually have to go over to my razor tool to be able to accomplish this. Then I'm going to do my Shift Delete, and that goes away. Okay, so really nice. Okay, now there is also trimming. I'll do a separate lesson on that right after this. Okay, but just try that out, work with the razor tool, work with the keyboard shortcut, and then again, understand if you hold down the shift key and then delete, you're going to get rid of that extra space. All right, we'll see you in the next lesson. Let's now talk about trim edits. And this is going to be one of the more basic and pretty straightforward ways that you can make some edits. So if we watch our sushi chef coming over here, great. And let's say we decide we actually want a little more of what's on there. What's really neat about this is that even though I have been working and I've already edited some of this stuff out to be shorter, and I've gotten little pieces of it from my in and out from where it started in my source, the stuff that we can't see, which is like over here or over here, right, prior to what we did our in and out, is still available to us. So if I come over here to the right, Notice how I'm getting this little red bracket and an arrow, and I click and drag out. I'm actually able to see the stuff that I didn't get the first time, right? And I just said, oh, you know what, that's actually what I wanted, right? But I said, listen, I didn't want that part. And then notice on the right-hand side, it's going to show me where it's going to actually begin and also how it's going to edit from my C glass over there on the left-hand side, right? So I can see, is that going to be a nice edit between from here to there? Okay, so it's really neat that even though we've decided what our in and outs are going to be initially from our source, we can always get those back without having to really do the edits all over again, right? So now if I watch this, starting a little bit later, but then I'm getting something a little bit different. But let me go ahead and just bring a little bit more out. Let's just go all the way to the end this time. And we'll be able to watch it. It's going to be longer. And we're going to see the chef a little bit longer. Okay, that's pretty great. I kind of like that. I don't really need to see the sign. And if I make a mistake or if I decide, you know, something creative a little bit different, I can always bring those things back. Okay, so that's pretty neat. All right, now let's see it from another perspective. Let's go over to here to this clip right here. I'm going to watch this and it's okay. You know what? That little part came up a little bit too much. I don't really need all that. So I'm going to just make all that stuff go away. So I'm going to go over to here and then notice how my little bracket is facing the other direction. If I come over to here, it's facing this direction. So it's kind of important depending on where you're going to be trimming from. So and if I just go ahead and just trim this way, watch what's going to happen now. Because I have two clips side by side, there becomes that gap, just like we saw in that last video. And that obviously is not what you want. So what we're going to do this time, I'm going to go and undo, is I'm going to hold down the Control or Command key as I do that. Watch this. And then as I do that, notice how it doesn't matter, right? It just basically says, hey, we're going to take that, and then it brings it back over to the left, right? If you see that, how it says, hey, not a big deal, because I'm going to close out that gap. This clip here is going to be shorter, but it's going to bring it back. This clip does not get affected, but everything else, right, gets a little bit shorter in terms of the entire length of the video, but only this one really gets shortened, right, because that's what I just trimmed, okay? But I didn't get any gap as a result of that, okay? So really nice. So let's just do another one that you might do very often just from the beginning. So I'm just going to go ahead and just hold down my Control or Command key, look for that little bracket, and then notice I don't lose anything from the beginning. See that? Let's go right to there and then, okay, great. So there's no gap, no nothing right there. It does make the entirety of the video shorter, okay? But all I'm losing now is just the beginning of that sign. Okay, and a few of those other things were edited out as well, okay? And then here's another one I don't really need to see. These bartenders, I'm really just focused on the chef. So again, hold down the Control or Command key and then I just wait till we see him. And you notice here, there's a little preview. There he goes. That's really all I care about. I don't really need to see them. So notice the previews in my program panel. Good. He's the most exciting part of this. And now because I'm holding down the Control or Command key, I'm not going to be losing anything. There's no gap or anything like that. Let's watch that again. And now, great. Wonderful. Okay, so practice that. Definitely necessary, definitely useful, definitely valuable, definitely powerful. All right, so we'll see you in the next lesson. Now, I've reached a point in my project where I decided, listen, you know what? I'm going to mix things up a bit, and I want to bring in some other video that I've shot from my science bin. And I want to kind of mix up all my restaurant stuff a little bit in the beginning. So I want to bring in something like you see I have my little beginning of my Tesla coils. I'm going to have these little hands coming in. You know, so I'm going to go ahead and clear this in and out. And you can see I'll have some things in there. I want to bring those in, so they're just going to come right around here. Okay. Now I have a few options of how I can do that. Some of the stuff we've done already before, but we did them with our timeline more or less being empty. Now when things are getting a little bit more crowded, let's see what our options are for bringing in this content, right? And it's going to be very similar to what we saw, but we're going to have a little bit of kind of nuance. Okay, so we see here we have our insert, we have our overwrite, and we also have the ability to do our ins and outs. Okay, so I'm going to wait for like the hands to come in there. That's great. So I'm going to say In, play it. Okay, and then that's a pretty good one. Pretty cool. All right, I like that. Now, notice where my playhead is inside of my timeline. This is where it's going to end up. So I kind of want to just wait and see when's going to be a good time, right? He's just kind of looking at his phone or something like that. So it's like, okay, that's not necessarily as engaging. We're going to see him in action anyway. So maybe like as soon as we move away from the food, we start showing something from this Tesla coil. Now let's just see what our options are here. First thing I want you to notice is that I put my track setting back to where they were initially. Remember, I moved them to V2 and to A2. I want to move them back to here because I want them all on the same track. I don't want to have any B-roll or anything like that. I'm going to have them just right here. And my goal is to have it kind of sandwiched right into here. I'm going to kind of eat away at all this stuff here. Okay, so let's just see what our options are here. So if you'll notice, again, I have my insert and I have my overwrite. So let's see what happens when I do insert. You'll notice, oh, okay, that's interesting. Just kind of pushes that away, pushes it over. Go ahead and undo that. Let's now try overwrite. And then notice what that does. It essentially just gobbles up all of that video information where the video length is still the same. So let me go ahead and undo that one more time. Notice how this is 18 seconds. You can see the whole video length right there. I'll do it the first way. Now it's 20 seconds, right? It basically pushed everything off to the side. So it's leaving, it cut it in half, right? But it's leaving all this stuff in there that I don't really want. Okay, so it's like, okay, yeah, that's interesting. What do I do there? Well, the reality is I want to overwrite this. So because I want to keep the same length of time and I just want to kind of gobble that up. All right, oh, that's pretty cool. Great. And now it's still 18 seconds. And now I can see, all right, very good. Okay, but he's still there, right? And of course I can get rid of him. I just learned about, how we can just hold down the Command or Control key and then just bring that in if I want to. Okay, so not too shabby, and you can see how easy it is to be able to do that. Now we can see the difference between insert and overwrite in a different context. Okay, now let me show you potentially a different way you might want to do this to be potentially a little bit more kind of exact, if you will. So I'm going to go ahead and just undo that, and I'm going to clear out my ins and outs here. But this time I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to do an in and out on this part here, right? In my program, I'm going to do an in and out because what I'm going to be doing in this case is I'm going to be telling Premiere where that I want to actually overwrite, okay? So essentially I'm kind of marking it to basically say, hey, listen, this is where, things are going to start getting a little bit like, no, thank you. So I'm going to just say in right there. And now let me go ahead and just go right to this spot, right? And I can just hit the down arrow, right? Makes it a lot easier. Notice how that down arrow clips right to it. I'm going to say, oh, just like that. Okay, you see that? So it's like, I know for sure, I just don't want any of that. So I can be very precise about it because I've selected the whole part that I don't want and what I do want to be overwritten. Okay, so think about that. Okay, so now let's go ahead and just say overwrite, and then notice what it did. It's perfect, right? I got just as much video as I needed to overwrite that guy, and then it goes right into that. Okay, so understand what we did there. You can do the in and out from the source panel, or you can do it in the program panel where you can say, hey, listen, this is the area that I want to overwrite. Okay, not this is the stuff that I want to take and overwrite something else. Okay, so nice way to kind of just, jerry rig it a little bit to kind of be a little bit more kind of precise, a little more creative and kind of nuanced of how you want to overwrite or insert your data. Okay, all right, so try that out, practice all this stuff. Make sure it makes sense, make sure you're fluid in your process, and we'll see you in the next lesson. In this lesson, we're going to talk about the Ripple Edit tool and the Rolling Edit tool. And where do we find those tools? We're going to find them over here with all these little icons. Now, if you'll notice over here, there's this little double-sided arrow. If you hold down your left mouse button, you will see you have them kind of hiding in there. And kind of the culture of these programs is you see that in the lower right, you can see you have these little triangles there that tells us that we have other icons living in there for other tasks that we can accomplish. So notice here is the Ripple Edit tool, which is the B key for a keyboard shortcut, and the Rolling Edit tool, which is N for the keyboard shortcut. Now, we've already explored what the Ripple Edit tool can do, but just as a little review, let me just go ahead and zoom in a little bit. And I'm going to come back to the beginning. And if I wanted to, I'm just going to go back to this. If I wanted to actually just cut out some of that beginning part, I can do the Ripple Edit tool without even accessing the Ripple Edit tool, just by doing my trim, but my Ripple trim. So if I hold down the control key or the command key on the Mac, and I just go ahead and just bring that like that, notice how it's just eating away as a part of that beginning part, but it doesn't leave a gap and it doesn't really affect anything else. And that's kind of the distinction between the Ripple Edit and the rolling edit. But let's just try that in another scenario. Okay, and I'm actually going to use the tools that are here in these icons. Let me just go ahead and just make this a little bit smaller, hitting my minus key on my keyboard. And notice where my playhead is here. And I'm just going to bring in this little tornado video right there. Okay, and then also notice that I'm at V1, V1, A1, so that's going to be locked into those tracks. That's great. And then very simply, I'm going to just say insert. And you can see how it just inserts it, right? Just kind of just to say, hey, listen, here is this little beginning part of that like Tesla coil with the hands, and then it comes again just like that. Okay, and that's quite a bit there, but I can play around with these to a certain extent. So let's just see what the difference is between what the Ripple Edit can do and what the rolling edit can do. And this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to access these. And the first way I'm going to do it is with my mouse by just clicking on it, and then later on, I'm going to get to the rolling edit tool by using the N key, right? Just kind of getting that habit. So let's just see what the Ripple Edit tool can do. So I want to ripple, so my tornado gets a little bit smaller, right? My tornado clip gets smaller, but it doesn't affect anything else, okay? So just notice here, my arrow is facing this way. I'm just going to go ahead and click and drag that way. And you can see, bam, how everything gets smaller, okay? Pretty straightforward, okay? I can go ahead and do it this way too, how that my tornado tool, my tornado clip, that also gets smaller, right? But my timeline in its entirety also gets shorter, okay? So we can see that, right? That's relatively intuitive. We've seen that before. Let me go ahead and undo a couple of times. And now let's see what we can do working with the rolling tool, okay? So I'm gonna go over here to N, right? And again, just as a little review, you can see there it is, the rolling edit tool, and that's just going to be the N key. Let's see what the difference is here. What this is going to do is it's actually going to affect two things at once. Notice how there are 4 arrows, right? It's saying, hey, I'm going to affect you to the right. I'm also going to affect you to the left. That's kind of the big distinction there. Okay, now it's also keep an eye on the timeline length. So I'm now going to go ahead and click and drag to the left. I want you to notice then, oh, okay, look at that. It doesn't affect the length of the timeline, okay? But it affected 2 clips at the same time, okay? So you can notice here, as I click and drag, see, I'm actually gonna see on the top part of my program panel, what I'm going to see and where that cut is going to happen, okay? That's great. Let's try it on this side, because this was kind of our key part of what we wanted to kind of see. Okay, you know what? I want to see a little more hands there. And then that tornado gets a little bit redundant after a while, but the hands are interesting. Let's bring this in, okay? So it's affecting both Tesla 1 and tornado at the same time, okay? So that's really your big distinction. People get a little bit confused about the ripple versus the rolling. That's your big takeaway there, okay? So are you affecting one versus the other? And then you'll notice where my edit actually changes a little bit, right, on both sides of things. All right, so practice that, use your keyboard shortcuts for that, in terms of accessing them, but also remember you can access the Ripple tool by holding down the Command or Control key while you're doing your trim edits. Okay, very good. We'll see you in the next lesson. We've discussed the rolling and the rippling edit tools. Naturally, we're now going to talk about the slip and slide tools. Okay, so a lot of fun with these and not quite as intimidating as you might think they are, okay? Because the names don't necessarily lend themselves to understanding kind of what they do, but once you kind of give it a little bit of kind of grace, you'll understand and kind of have some forgiveness around it. Okay, so let's just see what and where the slip and slide tools can do. So they're in this same area over here where we have our toolbars, and you're going to see that over here is our slip and our slide tools. So let's just first take a look at what the slip tool is and notice what the keyboard shortcuts are. And I want you to notice here what's happening with this particular clip here. Now, let's just say I have this clip inside here, but I know that there's some other stuff that's living inside of this tornado clip that I can't necessarily see, but I want to be able to see it, right? I want to be able to access it. So we've talked about earlier where like, even though we didn't get some of the stuff that's coming from the source and we might want to actually get to it again, it's still there, right? So what we can do while using, again, the slip tool, we can then see what's living inside of this. Now, this is not necessarily going to edit what's happening here on the timeline. It's just going to move what we view within this clip and within the source that's now out of sight, and it's going to bring it into sight. So check it out now. Watch what happens now when I just click and drag right on here. It doesn't affect the timeline so much, but take a look at my program panel, and we're going to be able to see what I can see before and then after, right? See that I'm able to move throughout the original clip to say, hey, listen, I want to go all the way to the end of that clip. That's actually a lot better for me, okay? So all I've done was kind of shift what is living inside of that little space for the clip to be able to bring that in, okay? So now when I view it, I'm able to see, and now it's going to go all the way to the end where it didn't do it before. Okay, very good. That's kind of neat. Okay, let's try that again. Let's go a little bit different ways. So now I'm still inside that and it's like, you know what? Let's actually, it's about as far as it can go. And just know that you're kind of at the mercy of the length of your clip also, because if you reach a dead end, that just means that your clip is only a certain amount of time. Okay, so then you're not going to see anything more, right? Because you can't really invent that. So now let's do it one more time. And we'll see I just kind of shifted it over just a little bit. Okay, and that's going to hang out there, and then it's actually going to go back up this time. See that? Do I want that or not want that? Okay, totally up to you. Okay, now let's see what its little partner in crime does, and that's going to be this slide tool. And that actually does make some structural changes to your timeline. So if you want to keep this exact same clip that you decided on by starting off with the slip tool, but you want to kind of move it around, you can very, very easily do that. Okay, so let's just go ahead and check that out. So I'm just going to go ahead and grab this, and I'm just going to move this over here. Okay, look at that. That just goes right over there, and then everything else kind of falls into place. Right, let's move this back. Okay, great. And that goes into place, right? Let's move this back over there. Okay, great. So you'll notice how it's just kind of taking the entire clip by itself, right, as a chunk, and then kind of moving it. Okay, so you can see you could just kind of just shift these things in place. All right, so it's something you just want to practice and see if that's going to work for you. Okay, there's other ways to do this, right? You can use the rolling edits to do the same thing, or you can do it this way. You know, a lot of different ways to accomplish the same goal. All right, so again, pause the video, practice the slipping and the sliding. Let us know how you've done, and we'll see you in the next video. Let's now talk about how we can adjust the speed and duration of a clip. So sometimes for creative effect or for dramatic effect, you may want to slow things down, or you may want to speed things up, maybe for comedic effect, you know, for lots of different reasons. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to work with this little tornado that we got. And then right towards the end, I kind of want to make this so it's going to kind of slow down a little bit for me. All right, so like right when I start to see kind of like the crown of it, I want things to kind of slow down. Okay, so very easily now, I'm just going to clip this right here. So I'm going to split it by just doing Control or Command K right there. And now this is its own separate element right there. You see that? So they're now two separate clips. And now what I'm going to do very easily is I'm going to right click on the clip and I'm going to say speed duration. All right, and now just notice the length of time that we have here. It's now 34 seconds. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to speed this down a little bit, right? Because right now the speed is at 100, okay? And I'm going to make this have a 50% speed, okay, right there. Now, a few other options you can do here is kind of nice, is that you can reverse the speed, right? So you can kind of go backwards, right? So maybe you're having people go really fast, but they're going backwards. Again, kind of a comedic effect if you want to do that. This is really nice. You can maintain the audio pitch. So if you have somebody speaking really fast, they don't kind of sound like a chipmunk. So you can maintain that as well. All right. Now, this is probably the most important part, I would say, is to make sure that this, in fact, is selected, right? The ripple edit, shifting, and trailing clips. Okay. By default, this is not selected. And what that's going to do, because this is going to be 50% slower, what it's going to do, it's going to make the whole video that much longer. So we want to make sure it doesn't eat away at anything to the right of it, okay, on the timeline. Because if that's the case, then, right, the video is going to be the same length, and then we're going to lose a lot of the stuff that's in the adjacent clip to the right of it. Okay, so we just want to make sure that we do a ripple edit. Okay, so let's just see what that's going to do. I'm going to click OK, and you can see now we've gone to 35 seconds, and now you can see here it is, and then normal speed, and then pretty cool. And then it goes back to normal. And let's just try that for this one too, right? Maybe that's going to be a pretty neat effect. Let's do it one more time. Right click, speed duration. Okay, and then I'll make that again 50. Keep the same thing here. Click OK. And again, that gets a little bit longer. See there? Nice. I like it. And it goes back to here. All right, good. And then let's find our Speed Demon Sushi Chef, and let's see if we can make him going even faster. Okay, so let's now bring him here towards the end. Okay, so let's go ahead and bring him in. All right, and we'll watch him in action. Okay, so let's go ahead and right click, speed duration, and let's make him go twice as fast. So we're going to say 200%, keep everything the same, click OK. And then notice how it's actually shorter speed, but let's just watch him go, or I should say shorter time duration. Okay, so, again, you're going to see when the time comes to do this, right? Because sometimes you're just kind of like, hey, listen, this is just kind of a hodgepodge of a lot of different things. And whether it's for dramatic effect or just basically showing as much stuff as you can in a short period of time, you can see that the speed and duration can really help out with that. Okay? Very good. Test that out, and we'll see you in the next lesson. In this video, we're going to talk about linking and unlinking our audio from our video. So earlier we talked about our timeline, how we have all of our different tracks, where we have our video track or we have our audio track, right? And we also have multi-track sometimes. Now you'll see here that when I click on either my audio or my video, they both get selected. See that? When I click here, this gets selected. When I select here, this also gets selected, right? If I click down here, they both get selected. There's going to be times when you don't necessarily want them to both be selected, because maybe you want to delete your audio but keep your video, right? And you might want to do that because, hey, listen, you're going to have a voiceover, right? And that background from, let's say, a restaurant or something is getting in the way. You just don't want that there. Or maybe it's your voiceover, it's your music, it's whatever it is that, like, hey, listen, that background audio just doesn't belong there. Maybe you actually just want to unlink them so you can move your audio around, right? And maybe you're actually going to take that audio and you're going to put it someplace else. Right now, they're kind of glued together. You might not necessarily want to have them together, and you want to have a little more fluidity and a little more independence and kind of isolate the two. Okay, so again, let's just take a look at these, right? So if I look at, let's just say, for example, like these people are kind of talking, if you can listen to this. I don't necessarily want that. I'm going to put in some like funky music behind that, or maybe behind everything. So I don't want this. So what I need to do is unlink these so I can delete my audio. If I hit the delete key right now, they both get selected. Again, I don't want that. So if I right click on the clip itself, you're going to notice there's this option to unlink. Okay, so if I click on that now, you'll notice now they're independent of each other. So I can click on this, hit my delete key, and then bam, there's that. And then if I wanted to, I can put in any audio I want there whatsoever, whether it's audio, voiceover. I can even steal some of this audio and bring it over there, copy and paste it. You can be as creative as you want to be, because now this is a single player, right? It's basically got like, it's not connected to any other audio anymore. So if I play this now, see, now it's silent. Hopefully you can hear that through my video, but you can see, okay, great, there's nothing there. So I can work with that nicely and easily. Okay, so The other thing you might want to consider doing, and that is related to this right here, is this link selection. Okay, so basically if I click on that, that basically makes everything unlinked, everything that's now inside of this timeline, whether you want that or not. So now, like, I could kind of just marquee over everything and just be like, okay, listen, you know what? No more audio. So it makes it a little faster to be able to do that. So let me go ahead and just undo that and maybe undo that. And then I'm good to go and I'm back. All right. So just some nice little tricks to keep in mind. Okay. And again, a lot of times we don't want one and the other. So we have the choice to be able to unlink them very easily, to be able to have them independent and isolated from each other. Okay. See you in the next lesson. In an earlier lesson, when we were discussing the source panel, we have been talking about both the insert and the overwrite tools. But now we're talking about the program panel and the timeline panel. So let's talk about its counterpart, which is going to be these two guys over here, right? So if you move your mouse over, you see we have the lift tool and we have the extract tool. So they're essentially going to do something similar to what we've already seen from the source tool, where we're going to bring it into the timeline, but it's going to essentially do its counterpart of taking it out from the timeline. So if you just say, for example, I have, this little endpoint right here, okay? And then I'm going to go and do a little out point right here. I want you to notice here, if I choose lift, notice what that does. Okay, it just actually extracts that out for me. Okay, so it could be similar to what we've done already with just splitting something, right, and then cutting it out, right, if you want to. Now let's just go ahead and do its counterpart, which is going to be the extract tool, and you can see what that does. That removes the gap. So that could be maybe a little bit faster of a way for you to be able to accomplish something that might take 2 or 3 steps, with using the razor blade, with using, rolling or rippling or whatever you're planning to do. This might be a little bit faster way for you to work with it. So again, it's coming back to those standard sets of tools that we learned about working with ins and outs, right? You're still going to use those. And then once we establish what's our in and out point, then we can come back and say, hey, listen, either want to lift it out and then put something in there instead of it, or you can use your extract tool, which basically just closes out that gap and then just puts it back into place and everything else falls in accordingly. Okay, so I just want to kind of throw that out there just so we can see kind of what some other kind of nuances we can do. So you have the options, okay, because everybody's going to want to do things in their own way, what's going to be the most comfortable, the most efficient for you. So there's a lot of different ways to do a variety of different things in our timeline, and it's going to overlap with how we work with our source panel and our program panel as well. Okay, so give that a shot, try it out, see how you go, and again, we'll see you in the next lesson. Let's now do a follow-up on our discussion about markers. Now that we're a little more comfortable with the program and we may have a little more to work with, let's now see how we can work with markers in both the program panel as well as the timeline panel. All right, so what I'm going to do very simply is just go over here to my program panel. And if you recall, the keyboard shortcut is just simply M for marker. Now, it's very important I establish where I want my marker to be. So again, I can use my up and down arrows to go right through the beginning of that clip. And I'm just going to hit the M key, and you'll notice here, bam, very good. There is my little marker. I can go ahead and double click on that, and that's going to pop right up. Okay, and then I'm going to say, should we speed him up or slow down? Okay, that's great. Okay, or maybe I'll even put that as a comment. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and do that and just call this speed. Okay, great. And then I can maybe color code that. Fantastic. There it is. And notice it's going to be both on my program panel as well as my timeline. Okay, so pretty neat. You can see both things are kind of interwoven with each other. All right, now let's see it in a little bit of a different way. I'm going to go back over to my Tesla coil, and I'm going to activate this particular one right here, right? I'm going to activate my timeline panel. And then this time when I hit M, I want you to notice very subtly, I'm going to see that I have this little guy shows up right there where I'm going to have my little timeline marker there. okay, for me to establish as my timeline and whatever and do things with it, right? So you can see, bam, that's pretty cool. So I can see that if I want to, okay? So 1 second here. And likewise, if you had actually created your markers in the source panel themselves, they would come together with all of their markers on here, which is actually kind of nice. You can see them there. Okay, now let's see what we can do as far as actually seeing our comments. Okay, because sometimes we want to be able to see the comments as we put them in, right? So there's a nice little sort of shortcut that you can do to be able to see, okay, what did I actually write here? I can mouse over it, that's pretty nice. But if you hold down the Alt key or Option key on your keyboard, notice I can actually open this up to be able to see my comments. Okay, pretty cool. Let's go ahead and do another one. Let's go over here to Tornado, right? So I'm going to go over here to this one. And again, I could use my up and down arrow there. Okay, and I'm going to hit this time. I'm going to show you kind of a double trick. With this selected, my program panel, I'm going to hit the M key twice. Okay, and then notice what that does, right? Really cool. You can see how it actually opens up to my dialog box. Okay, I'm going to say remove voices, yeah, or just add some cool music. All right, good. Let's make this a different color. All right, and then I know I got some stuff there, and now what I'm going to do here is hold down my Alt or Option key and then just open that up a little bit until it goes right to the end. And then I'm going to go too far. Okay, that's pretty cool. Now I can actually see everything there. Okay, so some nice little tricks working with our markers. Okay, so again, you can put the marker on the program panel and that ends up on the top of the timeline. You can put markers on the actual clips themselves, kind of neat. And then you can use the double M key, MM, to not only put a marker down, but it's going to open up to the dialog box where you can put in your content all within one, set of steps without having to actually, double click on it or right click it or something. Okay, and then finally, you can use your Alt or Option key to then open up the marker to be able to see what those comments are. Okay, so making it a little bit more interactive, more engaging, more collaborative with your team. All right, so go ahead and practice that. Lots of good stuff here. Get yourself nice and organized and strategic, and looking forward to the next lesson. See you soon. And welcome back, everybody. In this video, we are going to talk about cropping. How do we crop our videos to take something out that we don't want to see, right? Something's in the frame, you just want to crop that out. Or maybe you want to zoom in on something. So you're cropping everything out, but really you're just getting really close up on something that you do want to see. And that's what we're going to focus on mostly in this lesson. And we're also going to learn how we can do picture-in-picture using a lot of the same tools. Okay, so let's just take a look at this particular clip here. You can see we're watching this, and then we can see his hands are going really fast, and we want to see, okay, what's he actually working on there? I didn't actually get the shot I wanted while I was holding the camera. So I can post-production really zoom in on his hands to really get the shot that I wanted to focus in on, right? So I couldn't necessarily get it, but post-production, I can do that. So I'm gonna really just zoom in essentially by using the crop tool. So how do I actually do cropping? What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go over to here to my program monitor here, and I'm gonna bring this back down to 10%. Because once I double click on my little video image there, I want you to notice what happens. I double click here and you're going to see how I get this little bounding box. So that essentially takes me to the ability to resize my image. Now, why would I want to resize the image? Take a look at the frame that's right here. When I resize the image, the frame stays the same while the image gets bigger, but so big that it can't actually fit in the frame. So if I grab from over here, you're going to see my frame stays the same. And what I really want to do here is just focus in on his hands right there. Okay, so really nice. And now when I'm going to play this, you can see, okay, great. He's going to really kind of get zoomed in on that. Okay, so very cool. Okay, so, okay, I like that. So now I can say, okay, he's showing this here. And now I really want to kind of zoom in on, okay, great. Now, okay, it's a little bit off, right? So really what I should do is I'm going to go and undo all that. And I'm going to start off by kind of just giving myself a kind of a positioning shot here that like, okay, great, that's what we're looking at. And then I'm going to just split this, right? I'm going to slice this right where the playhead is, again, by doing Control or Command K. And then bam, I have this, and I have this, two separate things here. Now this is going to be my kind of long shot. And then as soon as we get to this part here, it's like, oh, what's he doing? Bam, and we're going to see, in fact, what he's doing. So we're going to do that by zooming in on it. So let's go ahead and double click here and notice what clip I'm on. And now let's just go ahead and just drag out from the corners here. And again, remember I'm at 10%. And then let's just go ahead and get a nice little shot there of his hands. Maybe that's a little bit too close. So again, double click if you lose it. And then just get right to that double-sided arrow. Okay, very good. And now let's just watch it. Let's just watch it from a few seconds before. And let's come back to the fit window so we can really see it. Normal shot. And then what's he doing? Bam. Okay, great. Now we can see that a little bit better. Okay. And then maybe I don't actually need all the rest of that right towards the end. Right. It kind of does a little bit of that, so I can easily trim that. Right. So I was like, okay, I don't need that's a little bit too much extra. Okay. And then maybe I would even like slow it down or whatever I want to do there. Okay. So you can see how nice that is just to be able to, okay, great. Let's go ahead and tell my story a little bit better. Now it's coming in a little bit granular, a little pixelated. That's because I'm at this playback resolution of just the half. So when you have high resolution video, 1080, 4K, you're not going to run into this issue. But keep in mind, if you are going to be zooming in like this and it's low resolution and low quality, it might look pixelated like this. Okay, but this is high quality, so I'm not too worried about it. Okay, so pretty neat. All right, so what we're going to do next is I'm going to show you kind of another sort of variation on what we can do when we're cropping, and that's with a picture-in-picture type of situations, which we are going to cover in the next lesson. So stay tuned and we'll see you soon. Okay, so the last lesson we talked about cropping. Now I'm going to get a little bit more kind of creative with our cropping tools and talk about picture-in-picture. So picture-in-picture and cropping kind of go hand in hand in a way, because essentially when we are cropping, we're just resizing the image, and we've resized the image so far to fit in the frame where it's going to be bigger so it zooms in. In this case, we're actually going to make our pictures smaller and we're going to put them onto another track altogether. So let's now work on a different part of our Exploratorium. I'm going to bring in our percussive machines here, and you can see how this is going to be maybe potentially a nice backdrop for some things. And as I do that, I might want to have some other elements of the Exploratorium on the foreground of this. And these are going to be kind of in the background, right? So we have a little bit more kind of visual interest, a few more things happening on the screen. Okay, so it could be for a variety of different things. And then maybe eventually later on you learn how to move some of these things around so there's some animation happening. Okay, so let's just go ahead for now, just for our purposes. I'm just going to bring in our tornado. Okay, and when I say bring it in, I mean I'm going to bring it in to another track altogether. Okay, because this part is really important where I actually want to make it so it's going to be on the track above the track that I want to have in the background, right? So think about layers, right? One's going to be in the front, one's going to be in the back. So very simply, I'm just going to go ahead and drag this over here. So it's going to be on V2, just like that. Okay. Now, when I play it, I want you to notice it just does that, right? Which isn't so bad, right? And we're lucky because of the screen resolution that it actually is portrait, right? So it's actually tall rather than wide. So you're able to see kind of what's actually happening here. But it is taking up a lot more than I'd like. So again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my best view here. I'm going to go down to 10%. And with this selected, I'm going to go ahead and just double click on here. You can see that I now get my bounding box. I'm going to resize that. So now that's going to be just kind of coming in over here, whatever you want to do, wherever you want to put that. Okay. And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to make this so it's going to come in a little bit later. So I have a little bit of the positioning of what I'm going to see there, right? And then I might want to put something else on top of that to make it so it's going to be coming up simultaneously. So guess what? I have another V3 that's coming up. So let's just go ahead and take a look. What else can I put in there? Okay, let me just go ahead and play this. See it? Okay, let's try another one. Yep, kind of like that one. Let's try it again. Great. So now let's go ahead. I'm going to come back over to here. I'm going to hit the minus sign. Okay, so I can see everything there. All right, and then let's go ahead and do Control minus so I can have a little more room there. And then just drag this on top of it. Maybe I want to have them come in around the same time, right? And you can see now I'm going to have some kind of competing elements here, all right? But let's start working with both of these at the same time simultaneously. So look at that. I have these two, Tesla One and Tornado, and I have my percussive machine underneath it. So I'm going to go ahead and select my Tesla One, double click that, resize it, bring this over here, and you can see now I have them side by side, these two things here, and I have this as my background. Okay, so let's just go ahead and just move this down a little bit, double click on this, resize this a little bit. Okay, so let's go ahead and maybe zoom in a little bit more so I can kind of see their sizes a little bit better. Move it to there. Okay, that's great. Okay, move this over there, move that over there. Okay, lovely. Now let's see it in action. So you're going to see how this is going to come up, the percussive machines by themselves, and then this is going to come in maybe a second or two later, combine with this, and you're going to see they're on separate parts of the frame. And of course I don't need all this stuff here, so let's just go ahead and close that out. And then just like that, and let's see what that's going to look like. I'm going to make that nice and big. Okay, now let me just go ahead and get out of that, hit the tilde, and then you know what? Let's actually bring this so they start off at the same time. Let's come over to there. Okay. Great. Now let's see it. I like it. All right, so you might have some more creative ideas as far as how you might be doing picture in picture. You might have a person who's your kind of omniscient narrator talking over something, or maybe someone is discussing their project and you see their face, and then behind them you actually see the project of what they're discussing. So you can see how easy it is to be able to do that, right? So the fact that you just need to have another track that you're putting one on top of the other, and then you're just resizing it, right? So really simple. So go ahead and practice that, and we'll see you in the next lesson. Well, thank you for joining us. I've had a great time teaching you all the wonders that is Premiere Pro. And I hope you are feeling empowered, excited, and creative around what you can do with this amazing program. Let's do a quick recap on some of the topics we covered. We began with understanding the Premiere interface and seeing how we can customize it to our needs. We then imported and organized our content into bins so we can view and curate our content. Once we did that, we were ready to bring them into our timeline for editing. And editing we did, like trimming, rippling, slipping, sliding, cropping. We also did a cool picture-in-picture effect. And even though we covered a lot in this class, there is a great deal more to learn. Again, thank you for joining me here, and happy creating.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget we also offer live classes in Office applications, professional development, and private training. Visit Learnit.com for more details. Please remember to like and subscribe, and let us know your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for choosing Learnit.